I was the smallest kid in school, and what happened next left everyone speechless. Before we continue, if stories like this inspire you, subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss the next ones. My name is Marcus. I was 12 years old when everything changed. Hillside Middle School was one of those typical American schools you see in movies, with long hallways full of lockers and groups of students who seemed to own the place. While everyone else seemed comfortable in their own skin, I was just trying to get through the day without being noticed. I weighed maybe 70 pounds soaking wet. My arms were like toothpicks, and my voice hadn't even started to crack yet. Every morning I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered when I would finally grow, when I would finally look like the other boys my age. I lived with my mom in a small apartment on the edge of town. Dad had left when I was 6, and Mom worked double shifts at the diner to keep us afloat. She tried her best to make sure I had everything I needed, but what she couldn't give me was size, strength, or confidence. Those were things I'd have to find on my own somehow. The cafeteria was always the worst part of the day. That's where the hierarchy became crystal clear. The athletes sat at their tables. The popular kids had their corner. And then there were kids like me who just tried to find a quiet spot to eat without drawing attention. I usually sat near the emergency exit, close enough to disappear if I needed to. It was a Tuesday in October when things started to go downhill fast. I was carrying my tray, carefully balancing a sandwich and a carton of milk, when I felt someone bump into me from behind. Hard. The milk went flying, splashing all over my shirt and pants. Laughter erupted around me immediately. I turned around and saw Derek Johnson standing there with his friends, all of them grinning like they'd just won the lottery. Derek was everything I wasn't. Tall, athletic, confident. He played on the football team and seemed to walk through the halls like he owned them. His father was some big-shot lawyer in town, and Derek never let anyone forget it. He looked down at me, literally and figuratively, and shook his head like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "You need to watch where you're going, pipsqueak," he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Or maybe you need to hit the gym instead of crying about spilled milk." His friends laughed on cue. I stood there soaked and humiliated, feeling every pair of eyes in that cafeteria burning into me. I wanted to say something back, anything, but my throat was tight and my eyes were starting to sting. I grabbed some napkins and tried to clean myself up, but the damage was done. The whole school would know about this by the end of the day. That incident was just the beginning. After that, it was like Derek had put a target on my back. He'd bump into me in the hallways, knock my books out of my hands, make comments about my size whenever he passed me. His friends joined in too, turning it into their own personal entertainment. I tried to avoid them, taking different routes to class, eating lunch as quickly as possible, but in a school that size, there was nowhere to hide for long. My grades started slipping. I couldn't focus in class because I was always worried about what would happen between periods. Mom noticed I wasn't eating much at dinner, that I was quieter than usual, but I couldn't tell her what was happening. She had enough to worry about already. I didn't want to be another burden. The physical stuff I could handle, sort of. Bruises heal, embarrassment fades eventually. But it was the constant feeling of being less than everyone else that really got to me. Every time Derek and his crew laughed at me, every time I had to walk away from a confrontation because I knew I couldn't win, a little piece of my self-respect chipped away. I started believing what they said about me, that I was weak, that I was nothing, that I didn't matter. One day in gym class, we were doing physical fitness tests. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, the whole deal. I dreaded these days because they were just another opportunity for everyone to see how pathetically weak I was. When it was my turn to do pull-ups, I grabbed the bar and tried my best. I managed 2 before my arms gave out and I dropped back down. The gym teacher marked it on his clipboard without comment, but I could hear the snickering behind me. Derek's voice cut through it all. 2 pull-ups. My little sister can do more than that. More laughter. I walked back to the bleachers with my head down, wishing I could just disappear. That's when something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, not with tears or anger. It was quieter than that. It was the moment I realized that if nothing changed, this was going to be my life for the next 6 years. Middle school would turn into high school, and the bullying would probably just get worse. I couldn't live like this. That night I made a decision. I couldn't change who I was physically. Not overnight anyway. But maybe I could find something, anything, that would give me a reason to hold my head up. I started thinking about what I was actually good at. It wasn't sports, that was obvious. It wasn't making friends or being funny or any of the things that seemed to matter at school. But there was one thing I'd always been able to do, even if nobody knew about it. I could sing. Not like shower singing or humming along to the radio. I mean really sing. My mom used to say I had my grandmother's voice, that she'd been in the church choir for 40 years and had the voice of an angel. I had inherited something from her, apparently. When I was alone in my room, I'd put on headphones and sing along to whatever I was listening to. It was the only time I felt like I was good at something, like I had value, but I'd never told anyone at school. Singing wasn't exactly cool for a 12-year-old boy, especially one who was already at the bottom of the social ladder. But desperation makes you brave in weird ways. The school was having a talent show in December, about 2 months away. It was a big deal, held in the auditorium with the whole school attending. Most years it was dominated by the popular kids doing dance routines or comedy sketches, things that were safe and guaranteed applause. The idea of getting up on that stage terrified me more than anything Derek had ever done. But it also felt like maybe, just maybe, it was my only shot at changing the narrative. I didn't tell anyone I was planning to audition. Not my mom, not the 1 or 2 kids at school who were nice to me sometimes. I practiced in secret, choosing a song that meant something to me, working on it until I knew every word, every note, every breath. It was a song about not giving up, about finding strength when you think you have none left. It felt like it was written for this exact moment in my life. The auditions were held after school in the music room. I showed up with my stomach in knots, palms sweating, heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. There were maybe 15 other kids there, most of them looking confident and comfortable. I signed up, took a number, and sat in the back waiting my turn. Every time someone performed, I questioned whether I was making a huge mistake. What if I froze? What if my voice cracked? What if this just gave Derek and his friends more ammunition? When they called my number, I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the front of the room. Mrs. Patterson, the music teacher, smiled at me encouragingly. She was one of the few teachers who'd always been kind to me, who seemed to see past the size and the shyness. I told her what song I was singing, and she nodded and started the backing track on the piano. The first few notes came out quiet and uncertain, but then something shifted. Maybe it was because this was the one thing I actually knew I could do, or maybe it was because I had nothing left to lose. My voice got stronger, clearer. I stopped thinking about everyone watching me and just let the song take over. For 3.5 minutes, I wasn't Marcus, the tiny kid who got pushed around. I was just someone sharing something true and real. When I finished, there was silence for a moment. Then Mrs. Patterson started clapping, and a few other students joined in. She had tears in her eyes, which surprised me. She told me I was definitely in the show, that my voice was incredible. I walked out of that room feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time in forever, I'd done something that mattered. But nobody knew that simple routine was about to become news forever. Word got around school faster than I expected. By the next day, people were talking about the talent show auditions, and somehow my name came up. I heard whispers in the hallways, saw people looking at me differently. Some seemed curious, others skeptical, and of course Derek heard about it too. He cornered me after school near the bike racks. His friends formed a semicircle around us, cutting off any escape route. I could feel my heart start to race, that familiar fear creeping back in. "So I hear you're going to be in the talent show," he said, his voice dripping with mock interest. "What are you going to do? Tell jokes about being short?" His friends laughed. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm singing," I said quietly. "Singing?" Derek's eyebrows shot up, and then he burst out laughing. This was apparently the funniest thing he'd heard all year. "The pipsqueak is going to sing. Oh man, I can't wait to see this. You're going to embarrass yourself in front of the entire school." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "I'm going to be in the front row, Marcus, and I'm going to enjoy every second of watching you fail." They walked away laughing, leaving me standing there alone. The brief confidence I'd felt after the audition evaporated. What had I been thinking? Derek was right. I was going to get up on that stage in front of hundreds of people and make a fool of myself. Maybe I should just back out now, save myself the humiliation. But then I thought about the alternative. Backing out meant letting Derek win, meant staying exactly where I was forever. At least if I went through with it, I'd have tried. Even if I failed spectacularly, at least I wouldn't have to wonder what if. The next 2 months were the longest of my life. I practiced every day, sometimes for hours. Mom finally asked what I was working on so intensely in my room, and I told her about the talent show. She was surprised but supportive, said she was proud of me for putting myself out there. That helped, knowing she believed in me even if nobody else did. At school, the bullying continued. If anything, it got worse because now Derek had something specific to target. He'd make comments about my upcoming performance, predict how badly it would go, encourage other people to show up just to witness the disaster. Part of me wanted to prove him wrong so badly it hurt. Another part of me was terrified he might be right. The week before the talent show, something unexpected happened. I was leaving school late after a practice session with Mrs. Patterson when I ran into Principal Morrison in the hallway. He was a tall man in his 50s, always wearing a suit and tie with gray hair and serious eyes. Most students were intimidated by him, including me. I'd only spoken to him once before, when I first enrolled at the school. "Marcus," he said, stopping me. "I heard you're performing in the talent show." "Yes, sir," I managed to say, wondering if I was somehow in trouble. He studied me for a moment, and I couldn't read his expression. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "I'm looking forward to it. Mrs. Patterson says you have real talent." I didn't know what to say. The principal knew who I was, knew I was in the show, and was apparently planning to attend. It should have made me more nervous, but strangely it didn't. It made me feel like maybe this mattered to someone other than just me. "Thank you, sir," I finally responded. He nodded and started to walk away, then paused and turned back. "Marcus, I know things haven't been easy for you here. I know more than you probably think I do. But I've been a principal for 23 years, and I've learned something important. The kids who get knocked down the most are often the ones who end up surprising everyone. Don't let anyone convince you that you're less than you are." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the empty hallway trying to process what he'd just said. He knew. Somehow, he knew about Derek, about everything, and instead of the usual adult response of telling me to toughen up or ignore it, he'd actually acknowledged it mattered. That conversation stuck with me. When doubt crept in during practice, when Derek said something particularly cruel, I'd remember what Principal Morrison said. The kids who get knocked down the most are often the ones who end up surprising everyone. The night of the talent show arrived faster than I wanted it to. Mom took the evening off work, which was rare, and she helped me pick out what to wear. Nothing fancy, just clean jeans and a button-down shirt. But she fussed over me like I was going to the Oscars. I could tell she was nervous too, but trying to hide it for my sake. We got to the school early. Backstage was chaos. Performers running around practicing last minute, checking props, dealing with costumes. I found a quiet corner and tried to calm my nerves. Mrs. Patterson came by to check on everyone, giving encouragement and fixing small problems. When she got to me, she put her hand on my shoulder. "You're going to be wonderful," she said. "Just remember, you're not singing for them. You're singing for you. Everything else is just noise." The auditorium filled up quickly. Through the curtain, I could see hundreds of faces, students and parents and teachers. My mom was out there somewhere, and so was Derek, probably in the front row just like he'd promised, waiting for his chance to mock me. The show started. Act after act went on, some good, some not so good, all of them getting varying levels of applause. I was scheduled near the end, which meant I had to sit through almost the entire show with my anxiety building. By the time my name was called, I felt like I might throw up. I walked onto that stage and the lights hit me, bright and hot. I couldn't see anyone's faces anymore, which was somehow both terrifying and comforting. The music started, those first familiar notes that I'd practiced 1,000 times. This was it. No turning back now. I opened my mouth and started to sing. The first verse came out shaky. I could hear the tremor in my voice, feel my hands trembling at my sides. But I kept going because stopping wasn't an option anymore. By the time I hit the chorus, something started to change. My voice steadied. The fear didn't disappear, but it became background noise, just like Mrs. Patterson said. I focused on the words, on what they meant to me, on every lonely lunch period and every bruise and every moment I'd felt invisible. The song built, and my voice went with it. I could feel it resonating in my chest, filling the auditorium. This was the part I'd practiced most, the bridge where everything gets quiet before the final chorus. I let my voice drop to almost a whisper, and I swear you could have heard a pin drop in that audience. Then I came back in, stronger than before, pouring everything I had into those final lines. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. 1 second, 2 seconds. It felt like an eternity, and then the auditorium exploded. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering. I stood there blinking in the lights, completely stunned. This wasn't polite applause. This was real. I could hear people whistling, shouting. Mrs. Patterson was crying again from the wings. And my mom, I found her in the crowd. She had both hands over her mouth and tears streaming down her face. I walked off stage in a daze. Other performers congratulated me, some of them people who'd never spoken to me before. Mrs. Patterson hugged me tight and told me I'd done something special. I felt like I was floating, like none of this could possibly be real. The rest of the show continued, but I barely registered it. When it was finally over and they announced the winners, I didn't expect anything. Just performing had been enough, proving to myself that I could do it. But then they called third place, and it wasn't me. Second place, still not me. And then Principal Morrison walked onto the stage with the first place trophy. And the winner of this year's talent show is Marcus Chen. The audience erupted again. I walked back onto that stage feeling like my legs might give out. Principal Morrison handed me the trophy, and it was heavier than I expected, solid and real in my hands. He shook my hand, and there was something in his eyes, a knowing look that said he understood what this meant beyond just a school talent show. After the show ended, I was mobbed. People I'd never talked to wanted to congratulate me, ask me questions, tell me they didn't know I could sing like that. Teachers praised me. Parents stopped my mom to tell her how talented I was. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. And then I saw Derek. He was standing off to the side with his friends, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain, not angry exactly, but thrown off balance. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway, and I waited for the insult, the put-down, the something that would bring me back down to earth. But he just looked away and walked off with his crew. No comment, no mockery, nothing. That night, lying in bed with the trophy on my desk where I could see it, I replayed everything in my mind. The performance, the applause, the look on Derek's face. Something had shifted, and I could feel it even if I couldn't quite name it yet. The next day at school was surreal. People said hi to me in the hallways. Someone asked for my autograph as a joke, but it was a friendly joke, not a mean one. A few girls from my grade who'd never acknowledged my existence told me I was amazing. It was like I'd gone from invisible to visible overnight. Derek and his friends kept their distance. They didn't apologize or suddenly become my friends, but the active bullying stopped. No more shoulder checks in the hallway. No more knocking books out of my hands. It was like the talent show had rewritten some invisible social contract, and everyone, including Derek, had to acknowledge it. But the real change wasn't external. It was internal. Standing on that stage and doing the thing I was most afraid of had broken something open inside me. I'd proven to myself that I was more than what other people said I was, more than my size or my shyness or my fear. The kid who could barely manage 2 pull-ups had gotten up in front of hundreds of people and owned that moment. And if I could do that, what else was possible? Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside after class a few days later. She told me about the county arts program, a weekend workshop for students interested in music and performance. She thought I should apply, that I had real potential if I wanted to pursue it. The old Marcus would have said no immediately, would have found 100 reasons why it was a bad idea. But the new Marcus, the one holding a first-place trophy, said yes before his brain could talk him out of it. Mom was proud but worried about the cost. These programs were never cheap, and we were always just barely getting by. But I told her I'd find a way to help pay for it, maybe get a part-time job or apply for a scholarship. She looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, like she was seeing someone new, and she said, "Okay." That weekend, something else unexpected happened. Principal Morrison called our apartment. Mom answered, and from her side of the conversation, I could tell something was up. When she hung up, she had a strange smile on her face. "Marcus, Principal Morrison wants to meet with us Monday morning before school. He said he has a proposition for you." I spent the whole weekend wondering what that meant. Had I done something wrong? Was there some rule against winning the talent show? By Monday morning, my anxiety was back in full force. We met in his office, a room I'd only seen from the outside before. It was neat and organized, with certificates on the walls and a photo of his family on his desk. He gestured for us to sit and got straight to the point. "Marcus, your performance at the talent show was exceptional. But more than that, it showed courage and character that I think deserves recognition. I've been speaking with some members of the school board and local business community, and we'd like to establish a scholarship fund in your name for students who demonstrate outstanding achievement despite difficult circumstances." I stared at him, not sure I'd heard right. A scholarship fund in my name? I was 12 years old. He continued before I could process. "Additionally, I'd like to offer you a position as a student mentor. There are other kids in this school who are going through what you went through, who feel invisible or targeted. I think you could help them in ways that adults can't. It would be voluntary, just an hour or two a week, meeting with students who need someone to talk to." My mom looked at me, and I could see she was as surprised as I was. This wasn't just praise or a pat on the back. This was Principal Morrison saying that what I'd been through, what I'd overcome, had value, that I could use it to help others. "I'd be honored," I said, and meant it. Over the next few weeks, things continued to change. The county arts program accepted me with a partial scholarship after I wrote an essay about my experience. I started meeting with students as a mentor, mostly younger kids who were dealing with bullying or self-esteem issues. It was hard sometimes hearing their stories and recognizing my own pain in them, but it also felt important, like I was taking something terrible and turning it into something useful. Derek and I had an actual conversation for the first time about a month after the talent show. He approached me in the library, which was neutral territory, and asked if he could talk to me for a minute. My first instinct was to run. Old habits die hard, but I stayed. "Look," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "I was a jerk to you. I'm not going to make excuses or whatever, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." It wasn't eloquent, and I could tell he'd never apologized for anything in his life, but it seemed genuine. I nodded, not quite ready to say it was okay because it wasn't, but accepting the apology for what it was. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it?" He looked away, and for a second, I saw something vulnerable in his expression. "My dad's always on me about being tough, being the best, not showing weakness. When I saw you, I guess I saw everything he tells me I can't be. It was easier to make you the problem than deal with my own stuff. It didn't make what he'd done right, but it made it make sense in a sad sort of way. We weren't going to be friends, probably ever, but at least we could exist in the same space without warfare." The arts program opened up a whole new world. I met other kids who were serious about music, who understood what it meant to find your voice literally and figuratively. We did workshops on technique and performance, learned about music theory and songwriting. For the first time in my life, I was part of a group where I wasn't the weakest link. I was just another person with talent trying to get better. One of my mentees was a kid named Tyler, a 6th grader who reminded me so much of myself it was painful. Small for his age, quiet, always trying to disappear. He'd been getting bullied by some 8th graders, and his parents had asked if he could talk to me. Our first session was awkward. He didn't want to open up, didn't see the point in talking to some middle schooler who couldn't actually change anything. But I told him my story. Not the triumphant version people were starting to tell around school, but the real one. The fear, the shame, the nights I'd cried into my pillow hoping things would magically get better. I told him about almost backing out of the talent show, about how terrified I'd been, about how Derek's words had nearly convinced me I was worthless. And then I told him the truth I'd learned, that the bullies were going to say what they were going to say regardless of what you did, that you couldn't control them, or make them stop by being smaller or quieter or more invisible, but you could control how you saw yourself. You could find the thing that made you feel valuable and hold on to it like your life depended on it, because sometimes it did. Tyler started crying, and I let him because I remembered how much I'd needed to cry too. When he was done, he asked me the question I'd been waiting for. But what if I don't have a thing? What if there's nothing I'm good at? Everyone has something, I told him. It might not be singing or sports or art. It might be something you haven't discovered yet, but it's there. And once you find it, everything else gets a little bit easier to handle. I didn't know if he believed me, but he agreed to keep meeting with me. Over the next few weeks, we tried different things. Turned out Tyler was incredible at chess, had a strategic mind that could plan moves ahead. We started a chess club, and suddenly he had a place where he belonged, where he was respected. The bullying didn't stop overnight, but he carried himself differently. And that made all the difference. Watching Tyler find his confidence reminded me of something Principal Morrison had said in that first conversation. The kids who get knocked down the most are often the ones who end up surprising everyone. I'd surprised myself most of all. The scholarship fund in my name raised more money than anyone expected. Local businesses donated, parents contributed, even some students pitched in. By the end of the school year, there was enough to send 3 students to various arts and academic programs. I got to be part of the selection committee, reading applications from kids who wanted opportunities they couldn't otherwise afford. It was humbling and inspiring and made me realize that my story had become bigger than just me. Spring brought tryouts for the school musical. Old Marcus never would have considered it. Standing on that stage once had been enough of a miracle. But new Marcus signed up on the first day. I didn't get the lead, I wasn't that confident yet, but I got a solid supporting role. Rehearsals became my favorite part of the day. Being part of a cast, working together to create something, it filled a space I hadn't known was empty. Derek ended up in the musical too, surprisingly. He wasn't much of a singer, but he was funny and had good stage presence. We had to work together on a few scenes, and it was weird at first, but we managed. There was an unspoken understanding between us now. We'd never be close, but we'd both grown up a little, learned things about ourselves and each other. On opening night of the musical, I stood backstage with the same nervousness I'd felt at the talent show, but different too. This time I wasn't alone. I was part of something, surrounded by people who knew me not as Marcus the target or Marcus the talent show winner, but just as Marcus, another kid doing his best. The show went well. Not perfect. Someone forgot a line and we had a minor prop disaster, but good. Real. The audience loved it. And afterwards, standing with the cast taking our bows, I felt something I'd never expected to feel at this school. I felt like I belonged. Mom came backstage after with flowers, tears in her eyes again. She'd been crying a lot lately, but happy tears. Proud tears. She hugged me tight and whispered that Dad would have been proud too. And even though I barely remembered him, that meant something. Principal Morrison was there too, standing off to the side, watching everything with that same knowing look. He caught my eye and nodded, a simple gesture that said he'd seen what I'd seen. The journey from that scared kid to this moment. He'd been there for parts of it, pushing from behind in ways I was only starting to understand. If this story has already moved you, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel because there are other real and emotional stories you can't miss. As the school year wound down, I started thinking about next year, about 8th grade and high school beyond that. The future didn't seem as scary anymore. I had tools now, ways of dealing with difficulty that I hadn't had before. I had people who believed in me, and more importantly, I believed in myself. The County Arts Program asked me to perform at their end-of-year showcase, a big event where students from all over the region displayed their talents. It was at the Civic Center, a real theater with professional sound and lighting, way bigger and more intimidating than the school auditorium. But I said yes because that's what the new Marcus did. He said yes to opportunities instead of hiding from them. Preparing for the showcase pushed me harder than anything had before. My instructor at the program, a woman named Sarah who'd sung professionally for years, didn't let me coast on natural ability. She made me work on breath control, on hitting notes I didn't think I could reach, on performing not just with my voice but with my whole presence. It's not enough to sing well, she told me during one particularly frustrating session. You have to make people feel something. You have to tell a story they can connect with. That's what you did at your school talent show. You weren't just singing notes, you were sharing your truth. Don't lose that as you get technically better. Her words stuck with me. There was a balance between skill and authenticity, and I was learning to walk that line. Tyler came to watch me rehearse one day. He'd gotten better at chess, even won a small tournament, and was starting to come out of his shell. Seeing him watch me practice with admiration in his eyes was surreal. Had I really inspired someone? Me, the kid who'd spent most of the year terrified of his own shadow? After I finished the song, he asked me a question. Do you still get scared? I thought about lying, about telling him that confidence had erased all fear. But that wouldn't be honest or helpful. Every time, I admitted. Before every performance, every time I have to do something new, the fear is there. The difference is, I've learned it doesn't have to stop me. Fear and courage can exist in the same moment. You can be terrified and brave at the same time. He nodded slowly, processing. That made sense to him in a way that false bravado never would. But what nobody expected was what happened after that simple routine became news forever. The showcase was on a Saturday night in May. The Civic Center was packed with families, teachers, arts supporters from across the county. Backstage was organized chaos. Dozens of performers getting ready, last-minute vocal warm-ups, costume adjustments, nervous energy bouncing off the walls. I was scheduled to perform in the second half, which meant waiting and watching and trying not to let my nerves take over. Mom was out there somewhere in the audience. So was Mrs. Patterson. Principal Morrison had mentioned he might come if his schedule allowed. Even Tyler had convinced his parents to bring him, which meant more to me than he probably knew. The first half went by in a blur of performances. Dance numbers, instrumental pieces, vocal solos, group acts. Everyone was talented, way more polished than the kids at the school talent show. These were students who'd been training seriously, who had ambitions beyond just getting through middle school. I was surrounded by real competition, and for a moment, the old doubts crept back in. What made me think I belonged here? Then I remembered what Sarah had said. I wasn't here to be the best technically. I was here to share my truth, to make people feel something. That was what I could do that maybe others couldn't. I had a story, and music was just the language I used to tell it. During intermission, I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face and give myself a pep talk in the mirror. I looked different than I had at the beginning of the school year. Still small, still skinny, but there was something in my eyes that hadn't been there before. Determination maybe, or just the knowledge that I'd survived things I didn't think I could survive. When they called my name, I walked onto that stage like I'd done it 1,000 times. The lights were brighter than at school, the audience bigger, the stakes higher, but I'd learned something important over these past months. The size of the stage didn't matter. What mattered was why you were there and what you were trying to say. I'd chosen a different song for this performance, something I'd actually written myself with Sarah's help. It was about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you, about being small in a big world and refusing to disappear. Every word was pulled from my own experience, every note colored by what I'd lived through. The music started, and I began to sing. My voice filled that theater, steady and clear and true. I wasn't thinking about technique anymore or hitting perfect notes. I was just telling my story the only way I knew how. And as I sang, I could feel the audience with me, hundreds of people listening, really listening, to what I had to say. The song built to the bridge, the part where I sang about standing up after being knocked down, about finding strength in the places you least expect it. My voice soared, reaching notes I'd worked so hard to hit, and I felt something click into place. This was it. This was the moment where everything I'd been through made sense. When the final note faded, the silence lasted longer than at the school talent show. 3 seconds, 4, and then the audience rose to their feet, and the applause was deafening. People were cheering, crying, on their feet clapping. I stood there trying to take it all in, this moment that felt impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. I took my bow and walked off stage, shaking. Sarah grabbed me immediately and hugged me tight. "That was it," she said. "That was exactly what I've been trying to get you to do. You made them feel it." The rest of the showcase continued, but I was floating somewhere above my body. When they announced the awards at the end, I didn't let myself hope. Just being there, just performing like that was enough. But then they called third place, and it wasn't me. Second place, still not me. And when they announced first place, my name echoed through that theater. Marcus Chen, for his original composition and outstanding vocal performance. I walked back onto that stage in complete shock. The award was beautiful. A crystal trophy that caught the stage lights and threw rainbow patterns everywhere. But more than the physical prize, it was what it represented. Validation from people who actually knew music, who'd seen hundreds of talented kids and chosen mine as the best. After the show, I was surrounded by people. Instructors from the program congratulating me, other performers complimenting my song, parents asking if I had plans to pursue music professionally. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Mom fought through the crowd to reach me, and when she did, she couldn't even speak. She just held me and cried, and I cried too because we both knew this was bigger than a trophy. This was proof that everything we'd struggled through had been worth it. Principal Morrison found me before we left. He shook my hand formally, but his eyes were warm. "I knew you had it in you," he said simply. And then he added something that hit me harder than any praise. You've become the kind of person other people look up to. That's rarer and more valuable than any talent. On the drive home, Mom asked me what I wanted to do with the prize money. There was a small cash award. I told her I wanted to donate it to the scholarship fund we'd started. She looked at me surprised, and I explained. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Now I want to give that to someone else. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and I knew she understood. That summer was different than any summer before. I'd been accepted into an intensive music program for gifted students, a month-long workshop that felt like dream and boot camp combined. Students came from all over the country, and I was the youngest one there. For the first time in my life, being small and young wasn't a disadvantage. We were all just musicians trying to get better. I made friends there, real friends who knew me as Marcus the singer, not Marcus the former target. We stayed up late talking about music and life and dreams. Some of them came from difficult backgrounds too, had their own versions of Derek, and their own moments of wanting to give up. Sharing those stories, realizing I wasn't alone in what I'd experienced, was healing in ways I hadn't expected. The program pushed me harder than anything had before. 6 to 8 hours a day of instruction, practice, performance. My voice got stronger. My range expanded. My understanding of music deepened. But more than the technical skills, I learned about the responsibility that comes with talent. Our instructor, a man who'd performed on Broadway for 20 years, told us something I'd never forget. Talent is a gift, but what you do with it is a choice. You can use it for yourself, for fame or money or validation, or you can use it to make people feel less alone, to tell stories that need telling, to give voice to those who don't have one. The second path is harder but infinitely more rewarding. I thought about Tyler and the other kids I'd been mentoring. I thought about my own story and how sharing it had helped others find their courage. The choice seemed obvious. When I got back from the summer program, school was starting again. 8th grade, my last year of middle school. I walked through those same hallways that had once felt like a war zone, but everything looked different now. Or maybe I was different, and that changed how I saw everything else. Derek was there, taller, and maybe slightly less cocky than before. We nodded at each other in the hallway, an acknowledgement that felt significant even if we never spoke about it. He'd gotten help over the summer, I'd heard. Therapy for anger issues his parents had finally acknowledged. Good for him. Healing wasn't just for the people who got hurt. Tyler found me on the first day, excited to tell me he'd joined the chess team and made some friends who actually appreciated his strategic mind. Seeing him happy and confident made everything I'd gone through worth it. This was the ripple effect. How one person's courage could inspire another's, which could inspire another's, spreading outward in ways you couldn't predict or control. Mrs. Patterson asked me to help with the fall talent show, to mentor new performers and share what I'd learned. I agreed immediately. Standing on the other side, helping other kids find their courage, felt like closing a circle. Principal Morrison called me into his office a few weeks into the school year. I wasn't nervous this time, just curious. He told me that my story had made an impact beyond just our school. The local newspaper wanted to do an article about the scholarship fund and the student mentoring program. They wanted to interview me, photograph me, make me the face of the initiative. The old Marcus would have said no immediately, would have hidden from that kind of attention. But I'd learned that visibility wasn't the enemy. Silence was. If sharing my story could help raise more money for kids who needed opportunities, if it could inspire other schools to start similar programs, then it was worth stepping into the spotlight. The article came out in October. They'd titled it From Bullied to Brave, the story of one student's transformation. Reading it was surreal, seeing my experience laid out in print, quotes from Principal Morrison and Mrs. Patterson and even Derek, who'd agreed to be interviewed and admitted his role in what had happened. The comment section was mostly positive, parents sharing their own kids' struggles, teachers talking about the need for better anti-bullying programs, students from other schools reaching out to say they'd felt the same way. But there were negative comments too, people saying I was seeking attention, that I was making too big a deal out of normal middle school drama, that I needed to toughen up instead of playing the victim. Those stung more than I wanted to admit. Even now, even after everything, words still had power. Mom found me reading the comments one night, tears running down my face. She closed the laptop gently and sat next to me. "You know what I've learned?" she said. The people who criticize are usually the ones who've never had the courage to be vulnerable themselves. They tear others down because they're terrified of looking at their own pain. Don't let their fear diminish your truth. She was right. I'd shared my story not for approval, but because it might help someone else feel less alone. If some people didn't understand that, it didn't make what I'd done less valuable. The article led to speaking invitations. First just at our school, addressing students about bullying and finding your strength. Then at other schools in the district. Then at a county-wide assembly on youth empowerment. Each time I told my story, it got a little easier and a little harder simultaneously. Easier because I'd practiced, because I knew what worked and what didn't. Harder because every time I spoke, I met kids who were living through what I'd survived, and I saw my own pain reflected in their eyes. After one assembly, a girl approached me crying. She told me she'd been planning to switch schools, that the bullying had gotten so bad she couldn't take it anymore. But hearing my story made her realize she wasn't alone, that there was a path through the darkness even if she couldn't see it yet. She asked if she could email me sometimes, if I'd be willing to answer questions or just listen. I gave her my email without hesitation. This was why I'd chosen to be visible, to speak up, not for awards or recognition, but for moments like this where one person's story could be a lifeline for someone else drowning in the same waters. By winter, the scholarship fund had grown significantly. We were able to help 10 students that year with various programs and opportunities. I got to meet them all, hear their stories, see their potential. One was a girl who wanted to study engineering but couldn't afford the robotics camp. Another was a boy who'd taught himself piano but had never had formal lessons. Each of them reminded me of myself a year ago, full of talent and hope and doubt. The spring musical was announced, an ambitious production that would require serious commitment. I auditioned for the lead this time, something I never would have dreamed of doing before. The audition was tough. Lots of talented students competing for the same roles. But I'd learned to trust my preparation, to believe in what I'd worked for. When the cast list went up, my name was at the top. Lead role. I stared at it for a long moment, making sure I was reading it correctly. Marcus Chen as the lead in the spring musical. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. Rehearsals consumed my life. Learning lines, blocking, harmonies, dance steps. It was exhausting and exhilarating. The cast became like family, spending so much time together that we developed our own language, our own inside jokes. I'd never been part of something like this before. Never felt so completely accepted and valued. Derek was in the musical again, a smaller role this time. We had a scene together where our characters had a confrontation, and the irony wasn't lost on either of us. During one rehearsal, we had to do a particularly emotional exchange, and something in the way he delivered his lines made me realize he wasn't just acting. He was pulling from real regret, real understanding of the damage he'd caused. After rehearsal, we talked for the first time about what had really happened between us. He apologized again, more thoroughly this time, explaining about the pressure from his dad, the fear of being seen as weak, the misdirected anger. I listened and accepted his apology, and then I thanked him. He looked confused. Thanked me? For what? For giving me a reason to find my strength, I said. I'm not glad you bullied me, but everything that happened, it led me to this, to music, to mentoring, to becoming someone I'm actually proud of. If things had been easy, I might never have discovered what I was capable of. He nodded slowly, and I could see he was processing that. We'd never be close friends. Our history was too complicated for that, but we could be people who'd both grown, who'd both learned something valuable from our shared past. Opening night of the musical arrived. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled. I stood backstage with my castmates, all of us nervous and excited and ready. This was it, the culmination of months of work, the biggest performance of my life so far. Mom was out there with a front row seat. She'd bought the day tickets went on sale. Mrs. Patterson was there, and Sarah from the County Arts Program. Principal Morrison was there with his family. Tyler was there with his chess team friends, wearing a shirt that said Marcus Chen Fan Club that made me laugh and cry simultaneously. So many people who'd been part of my journey, all gathered to watch me do what I'd fought so hard to learn. The curtain rose, and we began. The first act went smoothly, everyone hitting their marks, remembering their lines, the harmonies blending perfectly. By the time we got to the second act, we weren't performing anymore. We were living in the story, fully committed to our characters and the world we were creating together. My big solo came near the end. The stage went dark except for a single spotlight, and I stood alone singing about finding courage when everything seems hopeless. It was the emotional climax of the show, and I poured everything into it. Every fear I'd overcome, every moment of doubt I'd pushed through, every person I'd met who'd inspired me to keep going. My voice filled that auditorium, strong and clear and absolutely certain. When the song ended, there was that familiar moment of silence before the applause. And then it came, louder than I'd ever heard, people on their feet before the show was even over. I looked out into the audience and saw Mom crying, saw Principal Morrison nodding with that knowing look, saw Tyler and his friends jumping up and down cheering. This was what it felt like to succeed, not just for yourself, but for everyone who'd believed in you along the way. The rest of the show flew by. When we took our final bows, the applause seemed to go on forever. Flowers were thrown onto the stage. People were shouting names. The entire cast was glowing with pride and exhaustion. We'd done it. We'd created something beautiful together. Backstage was chaos of the best kind. Parents congratulating their kids, cast members hugging and crying and laughing. Principal Morrison found me and shook my hand. "You've come a long way from that scared kid in the cafeteria," he said. "I'm proud of you, Marcus." Coming from him, those words meant everything. The rest of the school year passed in a blur of final performances, end-of-year ceremonies, graduation preparations. I was chosen to speak at the 8th grade graduation, to share some words of wisdom with my class. Standing at that podium, looking out at all those faces, I thought about what to say. I talked about courage not being the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. I talked about how the hardest moments often lead to the most growth. I talked about being kind because you never know what someone else is struggling with. And I talked about finding your voice, whatever form that takes, and using it to make the world a little bit better. When I sat down, the applause was warm and genuine. Some people were crying, including me. This was the end of a chapter, the close of middle school and everything it had taught me. Summer arrived, and with it, acceptance letters to performing arts high schools. I'd applied to several, not sure if I was ready for that level of commitment, but wanting to see if it was even possible. When the acceptance came from the best school in the state, with a full scholarship attached, I sat staring at the letter for a long time. This was real. This was my life now. The kid who'd started the year as a target, who'd been so broken down he could barely function, was going to one of the top performing arts schools in the country, on full scholarship, to study music and theater and continue developing the talents I'd only discovered because I'd been pushed to my absolute limit. Mom and I celebrated with pizza and ice cream, our traditional special occasion meal. We talked about logistics, about how we'd manage the longer commute, about what this meant for our future. But mostly we just sat together feeling grateful and amazed at how much had changed in such a short time. The summer program accepted me again, this time not as the youngest and least experienced, but as a returning student with proven talent. I went back to those intensive workshops with confidence I'd earned, ready to learn and grow and push myself further. On the last day of the program, we had a final showcase. I performed the song I'd written, the one about finding your voice, but with new verses I'd added about the journey since then, about mentoring and speaking and learning that your story could be powerful if you were brave enough to share it. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted so long they had to flash the lights to get people to sit down for the next performer. Sarah found me backstage afterwards. "You're ready," she said simply, "ready for whatever comes next." And I realized she was right. I was ready. Not because I'd stopped being afraid or because everything was perfect now, but because I'd learned that I could handle difficulty, that I could turn pain into purpose, that I could find strength even when I felt like I had none. The scholarship fund continued to grow, helping more students every year. The mentoring program expanded to other schools in the district. Tyler became a mentor himself, helping younger kids who struggled socially. Derek went to therapy and actually worked on himself, became someone who stood up to bullies instead of being one. Principal Morrison wrote a book about creating supportive school environments, using my story as one of his central examples. And me, I kept singing, kept sharing my story, kept learning and growing and pushing myself. High school was going to bring new challenges, I knew that. but I also knew I could handle them, because I wasn't that scared kid in the cafeteria anymore. I was Marcus Chen, and I'd found my voice. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and comment below which part moved you the most. And before you go, there's a recommended video right here that's going to give you chills. Watch it now. Have you ever judged someone and later discovered you were wrong? What lesson did you learn from this story?